Hmm? Ah!
Oh, why me?
Well, because you got potential. And the balance sheet ain't exactly in your favor yet.
Well, why you?
We all got something to atone for.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Angel, a still slaying Buffyverse podcast. I'm Jim.
And I'm Penny.
And I'm Kara. This episode, we're going to be discussing Season 1, Episode 1 of Angel, City of, directed by J.W. and written by J.W. and David Greenblatt and Janine Renshaw. The original air date on this one is October 5th of 1999.
25 years ago. The alternate titles for, I mean, it's the first episode of Angel, so I was hoping for something grand, but the alternate titles were kind of lame. We have Welcome to Los Angeles in French and in Brazil, Light and Shadow in Germany, my favorite, Los Angeles in Italian, and the City of Vampires in Latin American Spanish, and then in Turkish we had New City. Nothing too exciting there, which makes me sad because we have this whole new, we actually can call it a Buffyverse now because we've
expanded
a second series that and just kind of remembering back in time. Well, first of all, I get to say this since I'm hosting and I've been so excited to do Angel for about a year now. Welcome Penny and welcome Kara to Angel.
Woohoo! Yay, we're so excited to be here.
Finally.
So we were going to do flashbacks and stuff like that, but we realized that the episode came out the exact same night as The Freshman, so all of those would be the same. So over the coming weeks and months, we will start to cultivate and create whatever the beginning turns into for Angel. But for this episode, going back in time, those 25 years, which is crazy for me to say because it's not even half my life, going back 25 years, which all of us in this room can't say, but going back 25 years, what were your thoughts over that summer and heading into this, knowing that we were getting a second series connected to Buffy?
Non-stop enthusiasm. I loved Buffy so much, and my only complaint about Buffy was that it was 1 hour a week and 22 weeks out of the year, and I just wanted more. So the idea that we were going to get a whole other show in this universe was just, I was so enthusiastic about it. I was so excited about it. I was so on board.
Oh yeah. And I mean, during this time, the summer leading up to season 4 of Buffy, and
this is where you say something that makes me want to cry.
I was in between my 5th grade year and my 6th grade year.
There it is.
So I remember being super excited about Angel because, one, I loved Buffy, and I thought Angel was very cute. So I think that was the extent of my excitement at that time. But after rewatching in college and a few times as an adult, I found a whole new appreciation for Angel, and I'm super happy to be revisiting it again. I'm also very sick, I should warn you. So if I sound nasally and stuffed up, it's because I am. And I'm hoping I can avoid coughing, but please forgive me.
I'm just grateful that you are joining us, even though you clearly don't feel 100%.
Oh,
this helps.
It's been so long since the three of us have done a podcast together. I'm very excited about this. I mean, Penny, you and I have been podcasting like straight through the hiatus. It's good to have all three of us back once again.
Oh, for anybody who doesn't know what Jim's talking about, Jim and I covered the absolutely brilliant MCU/Disney show Agatha All Along on Disney Plus, and it's on the Podcastica Marvel TV cast feed, and we had such a good time doing it, and the show was so much better than we expected.
So good.
and the podcast was more intense than I expected. There was a lot of emotion that ended up happening there. And I'm really crossing my fingers that they actually do an Agatha second season, because
know.
I want to get the gang back together and cover that as well.
You
Well, I
guys
think
we'll
that
did
see.
a fantastic job covering that show.
Catherine
Thank
Hahn,
you.
Catherine Hahn getting like dipping her toes into award season, I think is probably going to awaken this new like version of Marvel, the MCU. So hopefully she'll play a bigger role in it. That was so much fun. Yeah, for some reason when I went into that was sort of like, okay, we're gonna stop doing Buffy for a while. We're gonna start doing Agatha. And in my head, I was like, oh, these will be like an hour and 15-minute podcasts. This will be nice.
Yeah.
The show will be
That
like
was
26 minutes long. It will not hit in any sort of way other than being fun. And I was a little worried that it wasn't going to be good. And it turned out that it was, holy cow. I
amazing.
mean, and it just grew upon each other. That was so much fun. Hopefully we can pull in some of those listeners into this, especially since Angel is starting. So if you're listening to this for the first time, Kara and Penny started doing Still Slaying a couple of years ago. You could go back and listen to that. They did kind of a partial season 1 and then dive right into season 2 and 3. So, and you know, I'm in there, and there's a bunch of other amazing podcasting guest hosts in there too. And now we've got kind of a solid 4+ guest hosts that are going to be joining us for all of these episodes as we head forward. So going back in time, I remember thinking that Angel leaving Buffy was going to be a gap, especially since the fill-in for that was kind of an unknown at the time. Mark Lucas, who you guys talked about, and the freshman who made kind of a brief appearance there, someone that actually grew up in my hometown, so I know him a little bit, but we'll get into that some other time. But I could not imagine that someone that I grew up with filling David Boreanaz's role. Anyways, we'll get into that in a different time. I do want to talk, before we get into the show itself, Penny, you mentioned something off air a few days ago that I just have to bring up because it's very true, and I think it's important for this series because we do get to see more sides of Angelus, of Angel, aside from all of the sides that Boreanaz gave us and Buffy, and he really got that beefy part where he got to play two different characters in reality. You mentioned like how intensely good looking he was, kind of in a conversation that we were having, and I bring that up because he has always been this super unconventionally good looking. There's conventional good look. I mean, you know, David Boreanaz, I know you listen to this, so please don't take this the wrong way. But he just has a look to him that is extremely unique. If there's one thing that they shed light on in this episode, it's that they give many sides to David Boreanaz.
All right, I just have to do this because we're talking about how good looking David Boreanaz is, and what I texted was, "Oh, I'm watching Angel, and David Boreanaz is so handsome, it's ridiculous." And
It's true.
he really, because he's got the square jaw and he's tall, he's got the broad shoulders, but then you're right that he has like it's a symmetrical face, but it's there's something unusual about his face that makes
Unique.
him memorable. And
it's perfectly flawed is always the kind of the phrase that comes. It's not a perfect face, but it is a perfect face at the same time. Again, I really want to meet you someday, David Boreanaz, and if you remember me, like, please.
Yeah. We all think you're very beautiful. We are not the only ones who have noticed this.
Yep. I love that. Oh my God. I love how quickly this show makes the city of LA basically a character. There are so many just like stereotypical LA things that are just beat by beat by beat, and it does a very good job.
The Hollywood party that is basically just this woman Margot seems to have a job where she like collects pretty girls for Russell to pick from. That seems to be her entire existence, besides booze and drugs, right?
It reminded me, this is so nerdy, Twilight and the Volturi, how they always have this one beautiful human woman kind of cultivating this pack of tourists for them.
Yeah.
To bring
That's
in.
not in the movies. Well, it's sort of alluded to in the movies, but they go into it more in the books about how they collect tourists to kill with this using this like beautiful bait woman, which is so gross.
Yep.
And it's the same
Clearly
thing in
it
this party.
works.
Like that's why Margot does the videotapes, is to send them to Russell so he can be like, I'll take
You
my
are beautiful.
It's like
Beautiful
a
man.
disgusting thing.
Thanks. You're an
But
actor.
it's also
No, that wasn't
like,
a question.
it's so funny because when this
I'm
came
Oliver.
out,
Ask anyone about Oliver. They'll tell you I'm a fierce animal. I'm your manager as soon as you call.
And even the Cosby stuff.
Not an actor. Funny, I like the humor. I like the whole thing.
This is based on real
Call me. This isn't a come-on. I'm in a very serious relationship with a landscape architect.
JW.
Allegedly right on set, which we can
Yeah.
see in this script. That disgusting when they're talking about Cordy at the end of the episode.
Oh god.
And
it's awful.
And
Doyle calls her a stiffener.
Yeah, she's a stiffener, and I was like, wait, what?
That is so crude.
Like, but I think it's funny because
I don't think it fits Doyle either.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely he's
JW.
a stand-in for, he's the JW stand-in on this show.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I because I couldn't quite figure her part out until I watched it, I think the second or third time, and I was watching her video Cordy, and then we see at the end he's watching a video of Tina, and Cordy shows up, and he's like kind of wistfully looking when we get introduced to Lindsay for the first time. We see him watching this video, and we see
Lindsay.
Cordy, and I'm like, oh gosh, she's making these videos. She just gets that's her job. She's implicitly involved. Yep.
Pretty girls, and she probably, that's how she affords that nice apartment. That's how she throws these connected people Hollywood parties, because Russell bankrolls her because she's his like fisher.
Yeah.
Or whatever. I don't know what the word is for that person. Thank God, because I've never been in that position. But it seems to me that is the setup, is that like Russell has found someone, and she's so grossed out by herself that she's like using drugs and booze to cope with it. But
it's so depressing.
There are many like small comments throughout the episode of people talking about like, that's this town, that's how LA is, that's this industry. And it's funny, people in the entertainment industry love to talk about the entertainment industry, and they love to think that problems within the entertainment industry are unique to it. And I got to tell you, this stuff happens in other industries as well. Wherever there is money, there are people who are using that money to do gross things. It's just that because of the way that entertainment works, where there's lots of people who are not employees who are trying to get jobs, that there's a lot of young exploitable people who don't have any system around them to protect them, who are vulnerable to this kind of predation.
I mean, you look at education, for example, where you have patriarchal system of male administrators and young female teachers, where you have had in the past similar situations like that. The sad part about it is, in this series really, and in this episode specifically, I think that it's put in there on purpose, the kind of the plasticness of Hollywood, but I think that undercurrent, it's just part of who Joss Whedon is. I think part of it's parody, and I think part of it is just
his actual personality seeping in.
I think he's one of those guys who tells himself that because he's not like an actual what's the word we're supposed to use now, grapist, that his like gross behavior is okay. And it's like the whole nice guy thing, right? Like, by comparison to the really horrible people, I'm a good guy. But it's like, no, you're also a bad guy, just like slightly less of a bad guy than these other people. It's a constant struggle about artists who are talented at their art and also creeps, and what to do about them and what to do about their art. And it's a topic I've talked about a lot here. We talked about it on Cast of the Rings. We talked about it in Agatha. Like it comes up a lot. We talked about it last week in relation to Kevin Spacey. Like it's just it's a problem.
And is forever relevant,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
it's so interesting that he wrote this and centered like a lot of plot around this power dynamic that exists in Hollywood that he's part of.
Yeah.
And it's just like no self-awareness, right? Because I'm sure
buddy.
he thinks he's one of the good guys, or he at least used to think
because
that.
he wrote a show about this feminist icon, this powerful blonde woman, like, and people still kind of exalt him and ignore all the problematic things to this day.
Yeah.
Because
And
of
he
that.
even had Doyle give that speech to Angel about how, like, if you're not connected to humans enough that you can have perspective on the world, eventually their blood is going to tempt you and you're going to think, oh, if I eat one, I've saved like all these other people, the math works out. And I think that's the attitude of a lot of people is like, oh,
yeah,
but I've done so much good. I can assault this one woman. It's all right.
Stay connected, because if you don't, that one that's okay is going to turn you.
It's really good advice for anybody, actually. Like Angel's, response to losing his relationship with Buffy, to leaving Sunnydale. Like, we open the episode and he is alone literally in a basement, alone with like nobody, and he's pretending to be drunk at this bar talking about how he's alone and lonely, and when he approaches Tina he talks about how he's lonely, and he was fully intending to live his unlife in Los Angeles alone, and if Doyle hadn't pushed him and Cordelia hadn't shown up, that's what he would have done, and it would have ended badly, like really badly. Either he would have run back to Buffy, or he would have gone down a dark path.
I have to say, Angel and the humor that develops, the style of humor that develops in this show, I just love, because Angel's humor has always been very dry and kind of subtle. And one of my favorite moments in the episode is when he's pretending to be drunk and it's focused on his face.
Oh my God.
Like, talking about Buffy, and he's like, and talking about her hair and saying, you kind of remind me of her. And
then it pans over. And and you're literally thinking in your head, oh, they literally picked and then he continues, he keeps looking at him saying, it's your hair, and he's bald, and he's black, and he's like,
looking at
older
an
man,
Angel like he is insane. And, like, what the hell, man?
What's great about how that was filmed, though, is I remember watching it for the first time after many, many years not watching it, thinking, what are they doing? And then, and this is why I think David Boreanaz doesn't get enough credit. There's that moment where Josh Holloway comes over and leans over, and he's playing that drunk, and Josh Holloway walks away with the girl that kind of looks like Buffy, and then we see like the brilliance of who David Boreanaz is and why he became such a TV thing in our culture. His face just changes. And and immediately go, oh,
he's not drunk.
Yeah, and that turn, and I saw an interview that one of the best scenes in any season of Angel, that turn off the stool where he walks out, and you know what's about to happen.
So smooth.
Well, and David Greenblatt mentioned this, and he said he was such a fan of John Woo films. That
you can see it.
This was a direct, like, they wanted to put that in the first episode to set tone for how Angel can turn on a dime into kind of that silent killer that we know that he is, even though he's not Angelus anymore. That's still there. And
the John Woo aesthetic is so perfect for the tone of the show that it's like a darker, like, more grungy, adult show than Buffy, and and there's this drama to it, right? Like, Angel is often in these long coats, and he, like, speaking of Agatha Harkness, swoops around with the coat in a way, like, the coat is its own character in a lot of the shots. It billows in the wind, it flaps, it swoops, and it's part of his whole presentation. And
Yep.
Agatha was like a coat swooper,
Yeah.
like extraordinaire in
Well,
Agatha Harkness.
Expert.
And they do a lot of photography from low down, looking up at Angel, making him look larger than life. And it's so
dramatic,
effective.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
dark,
The music
and
that goes with it. Yeah, and this is a change. Like the coat was always there. It was there in Buffy, but it becomes a part of there in Angel.
Oh, yeah.
It very much. I never in Buffy, I never considered him a Batman like character, but through this whole episode,
He is so Batman.
I mean,
Yeah.
when he when those stakes come out of his coat, I'm like,
Yes.
does he have a belt on where he can pull off all of his little tools? Because
Yeah.
I really and I mean, as we go down the path of Angel over the seasons, and he kind of swoops in and out of all the different ways he does things and who he does them for. I mean, he definitely kind of has a Bruce Wayne kind of connectivity throughout, and I just love
Without the money.
well.
Eh.
Spoiler
Yeah,
section, we can talk about how he ends up with money later down the road. But I will
Yeah.
say too, immediately, and I, to be honest with you, I'm not a big fan of the pilot. However, the tone difference from Buffy, there's more light and there's more dark. It's very interesting too, because there's definitely more light for Angel. There's a couple of scenes where I'm like, why isn't he burning up here?
Yeah.
And I just love that they very much made him the center of this show. There's only 3 main cast that's part of the show, and just a complete change in tone, which was definitely needed, because Buffy has her zone, and now they've got this whole new zone with
Yeah.
David
They made a
Boreanaz.
distinct difference between the two, which was so smart, because I think a lot of people, when they heard about the spinoff, were like, oh, it'll be just like Buffy. And it's not. It's just really, really not like Buffy at all. It's a wider world, and it's a darker world, and it's a more adult world. And it shares with Buffy quippy dialogue, right? Great action scenes, a sense of sort of ironic self-awareness, but in a very different tone. I think they did an excellent job differentiating the two shows without losing the kernel of what we love about Buffy.
For sure.
I think that's why it works so well, essentially from the beginning, because the show already knows who it is. Like, the show already has its own separate identity from Buffy. And it's funny you mentioned Batman, Jim, because in that opening scene, after he saves the 2 women and saves the day or night or whatever and swoops away, the score that starts playing gives me kind of superhero Batman vibes. And I think I read somewhere that the music director was intentionally looking for something. I think they said, I'm looking for Batman meets Smashing Pumpkins a la Cello Rock. And I was like, well, you got it. It was perfect. Like, it's so
That's a
interesting.
hilarious description.
Right? But it's perfect. I was
It's
like,
perfect.
the vibe that evokes is, spot on. You know exactly what they're looking for and what they're talking about. And I agree with you, Jim. Like, I don't love this episode from a standpoint of entertainment, but as a pilot, I think it succeeds in doing absolutely everything a pilot is supposed to do.
Yeah, it really does. And they found a way to give us the exposition of Angel's whole backstory without it being like, okay, get through the exposition part. Like Doyle telling Angel about his life, and then Angel being like, yeah, I was there. I know. is hilarious. Because as Doyle is talking, I'm thinking, well, here's where they sandwiched in the exposition, and then having Angel call him out on it. I was like, oh, the show knows exactly what it's doing. That's so clever.
Well,
did Doyle remind either of you of Whistler?
Yes.
He was.
We will talk. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's intentional.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, so first of all, about the pilot, there is an unaired. They call it a pilot. It's 5 minutes and 30 seconds that Joss Whedon put together to show off the show. It's attached in the show notes. It's on YouTube, Daily Motion, any of those things that you want to see, and it's telling the story of Angel. And they literally take that pilot and give it to Doyle in this shot. Now, when we talked about Whistler back when we were doing Buffy, I did an episode where he was in. There's no so. Joss Whedon has talked about this a few times. The idea at the time was for Whistler to be Doyle. The only reason why we get this version of the demon is because a couple of things happened, and I'll talk about it later, but just a long story short is the actor who played Whistler was doing other things, and a couple of other things had happened in between point A and point B that kept them from using him. And the irony with that too is of course, well, we'll save that for the spoiler section too. But there's a lot of kind of connectivity with why they didn't use Whistler, what ended up happening with the character in future seasons. So, but yeah, there was definitely similarities between the two, to the point where he's speaking with his natural Irish accent, sounds more Irish than Angel ever did.
Yeah, that's true. Angel, David Boreanaz is a wonderful actor in all things except his Irish accent.
So keep that in mind when you watch that little 5-minute snippet, because he says he's from Ireland, and I think he's trying to use the Irish accent when he's saying it. And I'm like, nope, that's so Kevin Costner from Robin Hood. I cannot even. Yeah, it's just it's David Boreanaz's one big weakness. He cannot pull off the Irish accent. So Doyle is played by Glenn Quinn, and people may recognize him, and at the time we all recognized him as Mark from Roseanne, Becky's husband. Oh my gosh, you didn't know that?
Oh,
Carrie just put that together.
I was just like, who the hell is he?
When he started speaking with that Irish accent, I remember thinking, are you flipping kidding me? This kid is Irish? And I'm like, he can't be Irish. And it turns out, like, I saw an interview right after the series, and I'm like, oh my gosh, for all of these years. Now, if you go back and watch those Roseanne episodes, you can hear the Irish accent, but I never did. Yeah. I just assumed, like any stupid American, I just assumed he was American, like everybody else is. Yeah, everybody's American.
If there was a light bulb above my head, you would have literally seen it.
Oh,
yeah, that's hilarious. The woman who plays Tina is Tracy Middendorf, and I looked up her IMDb page, and it is long and impressive with a whole bunch of shows I've never seen.
Yeah.
Interesting.
She's had one-off like guest star roles in shows I have seen, like 6 Feet Under, The Practice, 24. She had a run on 24, but then more recently she's been on a bunch of shows that I don't watch, like Boardwalk Empire, Body of Proof, Last Ship, Bloodline, Gone, I haven't even heard of. Scream, the TV series, she did 23 episodes of that. So she's got a whole big long career too. I just was like, have I ever seen this woman before? She's so pretty. And I just didn't recognize her. Oh, she was on the original 90210 as well. Huh.
Well, she also, we'll talk about this later, but she had a 3 or 4 episode arc on Lost.
Yeah.
Wait,
I don't remember her on Lost though.
She's one of those actresses that just you see and you immediately recognize. And
she was on Bones too.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's what I love, the connectivity of all these, because Whistler was also on Bones at one point. There's just a lot of interconnectivity between all of these shows, especially Lost. There's so many of these actors and Angel specifically that end up in Lost.
On
Josh Holloway, freaking love Josh Holloway.
We might as well talk about him right now, because he was definitely unknown before Lost.
Well, this was his first TV appearance.
And then Lost comes out like 2 years later.
Actually, believe it or not, this came out in October of '99. Lost came out in September of 2004. So it was 5 years between. Yeah. And to me, when I first saw him,
so different.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. No. Correct. Yeah. It doesn't seem. I was actually, in my head, I thought Angel started in 2000. So when I saw that it started in the 90s, I was even surprised by that. But he was, you immediately see, because I didn't
Yeah.
realize who this was. Obviously, the first time you see it, you don't know who this guy is, but you
Yeah,
go
he's
back
just
and
some
you
guy.
watch and you see Josh Holloway. Immediately, you see that smarm that we
Yeah,
get
and
to
that
see.
As soon as
voice.
and the voice, you're
Oh.
like, oh, I know that voice. That is Sawyer.
Yeah.
Oh, he was such a breakout star from Lost, right from the beginning. Like Lost started airing, and when it first was coming out, the only real name on the show was the guy who played Jack Shepherd, Matthew Fox.
Yeah.
Well, and I feel
Matthew
like
Fox.
Dominique Monaghan in certain,
Yeah, as a Hobbit,
groups.
but
Yeah,
probably a lot of people didn't even recognize him without his Hobbit outfit. And
true.
everybody was like, "Oh, Matthew Fox is in this new show, and it's an ensemble cast."
Yeah,
and
Party of
and
Five.
then everybody got a look at Sawyer and was like, "I want that."
a goner.
Yeah, like everybody was. It was like everybody was talking about Sawyer. Everybody was saying Sawyerisms. Everybody wanted Sawyer to give them an insulting nickname. Like it was just. He was such a huge breakout star from that show. A lot of people were, really, like Evangeline Lilly too. Like nobody knew who she was before Lost, and then
I
like
love her.
bam, she's everywhere.
She's so pretty.
Yeah, she really is pretty. And never needed to shave or wax or anything on the island, which was amazing.
Perfectly flawless skin, hairless skin the entire time.
Yeah,
And perfect eyebrows.
And none of them got sunburns either, which is like amazing. But yeah, Sawyer was such a huge hit and Josh Holloway broke out from that, and then he was in like a Mission Impossible movie and like
Colony was his next series.
Colony. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
With
Sarah Wayne
Callies. Yeah, but just a heads up for Josh Holloway, because he seems to be, whenever he comes out in anything, he stands out, because he does have a J.J. Abrams produced TV show coming out that's been in the works for about 3 years now, coming out on HBO, called Duster, which is it's got a lot of money behind it, and it's coming out in 2025. So if you've never seen Josh Holloway in anything, first of all, go back and watch Lost. But he does have a new series coming out on Max called Duster coming up, which is
awesome.
a retro 70s show that he will fit perfectly into.
That's gonna be really fun. I love the name Duster because it makes me think that he's gonna wear a bunch of long coats and swoop around like Angel. And I am all for swoopiness. I am pro swoopy flowing coats. I love them. I enjoyed in the 90s.
It's like an appendage, an extra appendage.
Lots of men were wearing long coats. I liked the style. I thought it was really sort of sophisticated and cool.
Ruined. Anyway, I won't talk about that.
So yeah, Angel at the bar, and then he saves those women, and then it's so interesting how he's like, "Get away from me," and I'm like, like 3 weeks ago when you were in Sunnydale, you would have been able to stake a couple of vampires without turning into a vampire yourself and having to like send people away because they were bleeding. Like we just saw you be fine during that whole battle with the mayor.
So fast.
Yeah, they sort of had him take a step back.
I was like, all right, man.
But it's worth it to have the cool, like, symmetrical staking with the wrist sheath action shot.
It's like he made his own little Wolverine claws almost.
Yeah. It was so cool. And then we move into the opening credits, and it's got, first of all, the music that we've talked about, but then the scenes that are from the first several episodes of Angel montaged together. There's a lot of great action, swoopy drama, darkness stuff mixed into the credits that I never get tired of. There's like jumps out of windows, and like I love when he just steps off that one roof.
Yeah.
Like I never get tired of the reminders of his vampire strength.
I mean, if you watch this episode and decide you're never going to watch another episode again, first off, keep listening to the podcast. But second off, the theme of this show so sets the tone. It's so perfect. I can't imagine a better theme, and I love the story behind it. But I just but they keep kind of the elements of that montage together for the whole series, adding little bits and pieces here as new characters are added to the show. And it's just it does set the tone for what this series really is. I mean, it
really does.
I mean, you could almost use it as the pre-pilot, because it does tell the story of who Angel is, and just
Yeah.
in a great way. And
Like-
there's no, trust me, there's no music like it. We're hunting. We're trying
Yeah,
to
we're
find
looking.
music lighting. There's no music like, not yet.
We'll
see
find something.
We'll see you soon, SoundCloud, but not yet.
I know.
Yeah.
I think the intro itself does a really good job of keeping this idea of Los Angeles, the city, as a character, because it immediately sets up this darker, grungier vibe than Buffy. It's not as upbeat. It's much more dramatic, which is interesting considering Sunnydale is literally on top of a hellmouth. But I think it's very poignant and intentional.
Buffy can go out in the daylight, right? So there's with Angel, most of the show takes place at night, and it has to be darker, and it's a bigger city, right? So the city itself is grungier, it's more diverse. In this show, we start to get more and more characters of color. Yay!
Yeah,
and
finally.
And we get to see more types of environments where things are happening. It's not just like outdoors and high school, right? Like the
high school
evil
is
in
over.
Los Angeles is integrated into city life. And so Angel gets to interact with like different industries and stores and people in entertainment
seedier.
and a law firm, which is going to be so fun.
I can't wait
this whole time to talk about the law firm.
It's like I don't think it was at all unintentional that this was in Los Angeles in the late 90s, because we see like some of the footage is directly from Skid Row, and some of the action that happens is from that same area. So I thought it'd be fun to look up what the murder rate was in Los Angeles.
Yay!
That does sound fun.
Compared to the rest of the country.
Yeah.
So the number is, it's in LA, the city limits, it was 11.64 people out of every 100,000 persons. So per 100,000 people, it was 11.64. For people that don't regularly look up murder statistics, that's incredibly high. Comparative to the US as a whole was 5.69 on average, while the state of California as a whole was 6.05. So it was almost, it was double the average of the United States.
One per every like 9,200 people is mortifying.
That's a high
insane.
rate.
And
this was also the height of like gang violence getting press.
Yes.
Everybody knew about the Crips and the Bloods at this point. It was all over the news. There were a lot of movies coming out around this time about like gangs in New York City, and it was becoming something, or in Los Angeles, it was becoming something much more sort of in the pop culture mainstream conversations. This is also the time in my personal life when I started spending more time in Los Angeles. I had friends who had moved there, and so I started going to LA at least once a year on a trip and hanging out in Los Angeles and falling in love with Los Angeles.
Aww.
And being like, well, Angel really makes it look dark and seedy, but like, have you been to LACMA? It's so great.
And usually very sunny, which I love. Angel driving off in a convertible.
Oh yeah,
in LA. I'm like, what?
Like, dude. But it's such a cool car. It's such a cool car.
This is why Spike is smarter than Angel. Sorry.
He blacks out his windows and drives with the top up. Angel's convertible is ridiculous, but it's so such funny. An LA cool guy car.
Oh,
and it's so
the best scene is when he jumps into his car and
it's the wrong car.
And it's the wrong car because there's exactly the same car. We should probably, I sent you guys the links by text. We should put it in the show notes. I just typed in like 67 versions of this car in Hollywood, and I'm not kidding you, like 60 showed up, and they use this car for everything, which I love the fact that Joss Whedon and Greenblatt and whoever decided to do this, literally use the car that is in every movie of all time.
Let's get the iconic LA car. And I have to believe that it had at least some bearing on Supernatural later deciding to have a muscle car, like a classic car. Yeah.
I love that car.
Well,
I may just love
the
Dean
Impala
driving that car.
one of the brothers. Like it's practically a member of the family. So
it is a character. It has its own episode where it's basically sentient. So
that's true.
legit.
That's right.
I love that episode.
Let's talk about Russell. The scene where Cordelia meets Russell, and she's all like, I've been to nice places before, not this nice, and my house was nice, and we had rooms we didn't even know what to do with, and you know, she's nervous babbling in that way that people do, and then
mirrors and lots of curtains,
and then there's that great moment where she realizes what's happening, and of course I have the clip.
No, I'm not. R2. Sonny, we had our own hell mouth.
God, I love her.
She's so
Carpenter,
charming, and her smile is like, it's like bigger than normal people's smiles. Like it's like half her face is a smile. It's so beautiful. And that scene is so funny to me. I love the way Russell responds when she's like, "You're a vampire," and he's like,
"What?
No, I'm not." He literally is like he's like a 4-year-old. He literally just says, "No, I'm not." And she's like, she's like, R2, and I was like, "What is happening?"
He like looks down into the side, like, no, I'm not. Like
he's the guy who plays him, and I can't think of it. He's got a really unique name. He's another one of those actors that just shows up in lots of different. He's been a good guy. He's been a bad guy. But
his performance here is so good because he is at no time does he like trail off into camp or overacting really the vampire.
Scary.
He's understated.
Get invited
like
to a
so
nice place with
he never raises his voice.
No mirrors.
He's just like he exudes this comfort in his position.
Hey, you're a vampire.
Like, I'm gonna kill you. It's fine.
No.
And like even
R2.
And he holds his own in a fight.
I'm from
against
Sunnydale.
Angel,
We had our own hellmouth. I think I know a vampire when I am alone with him in his fortress-like home. And you know, I think I'm just feeling a little lightheaded from hunger. I'm just wacky and kidding.
Where they are so assured that they're right, no matter what. And he's like, "This is what I do. It's fine." Like he just is so. I just thought the performance was fantastic. It's subtle and chilling. The way that he's not at all put off by Cordelia calling him out on being a vampire. He's like, no, I'm not. And then he's like, okay, yeah, I am. I'm going to eat you. It's like, it's so quiet and calm. And I think a lesser actor would have been like, mwahaha about it. But he really just, it's like,
it's more sinister that way.
I was surprised that he was
getting away with
it.
Yeah.
I just was completely surprised he was a vampire when I watched it initially, and he just like he never plays off like he's a vampire. I mean, right up to the end, you know, he's like sitting in his office, you know, with board meeting and sitting in the sun. You know, I mean, the sun's not shining on him, obviously, but it's just like he lives a normal life as a Hollywood
powerhouse
producer. Yeah, he's Harvey Weinstein.
He's got money.
Long before Harvey Weinstein.
I mean,
so
during
funny.
Harvey Weinstein.
When Angel comes in and Russell, obviously thinking he's untouchable, is like, you know, look at me. I pay my taxes. I keep my name out of the paper and I don't make waves. In return, I can do anything I want. And Angel's like, really? Can you fly? And I was just like, oh, this is perfect.
Yeah, the minute he said that.
Right amount of cheesy. But it's just so good. And I was like, uh-oh.
It's such an iconic death scene, too. It's like, I mean, watching him like turn to ash as he's flying and then just the chair hits the ground. I love that so much.
And everyone in Wolfram and Hart is like, oh, shit.
In my head, in this scene, Lindsay is like, well, you just murdered one of our clients. And Angel says, yeah, show me the body. But that didn't happen in the episode. I don't know where I got that from.
Well,
maybe it's like a deleted scene or something.
Maybe, yeah.
Christian Kane, I let me tell you. So he's one of my favorite actors. I've loved him for years and years and years, and I love the fact that David Boreanaz, I'm sure that Christian Kane got this role because of they were good friends long before Buffy, are still good friends.
Certainly how he got the audition. Right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's not how he got cast, but
sure.
it gets you in the door.
But Texas boy.
He in this role, he
old
is
friends
Lindsay.
with Jensen Ackles, by the way.
Yes.
I love it.
He talks about missing both of these guys in his
they're
life.
like best friends, but so cute.
How he portrays Lindsay, we don't even know his name in this episode, but how he ends up portraying Lindsay throughout, you can tell from this episode, and this is what this episode does very well, is they set Lindsay's character up very well as being someone who understands what's going on. He watches this happen in front of his eyes, doesn't miss a beat. Talk about parody of lawyers, right? Like he doesn't miss a beat. Angel puts his card back in his pocket. He walks past him. He gets right on his flip phone that I'm doing right now, and I can't believe I actually have one sitting next to me. And he calls and he says, "We need to have a meeting at 4:00. There's a new player in town." And actually, for me, that's when this series started, because that lets you know that Angel is
a player.
Yeah. And he is portrayed as such in a big way throughout this. In the same way that Buffy, and this is where the two shows are very similar about their hero. You never doubt that Buffy is way bigger than just a slayer in Sunnydale. Like she saves the world constantly. And you immediately are left, even though we get this small situation where, by the way, Angel does not save the day. He does not save the girl, which I think
love that.
Gosh, I'm starting to like this episode a lot more now that I'm talking about, which always happens.
That's what always happens. Yeah.
Like he does not.
It's brilliant.
I just realized, like, he does not do what he's supposed to do in the first episode. However, he does, because he doesn't
starts him on this path.
Yes, and then talking about Cordy too. I was concerned that they were going to play her as kind of that same parody that she was initially in Buffy. And that scene at the end where she's just in his office that we see at the beginning, that's just this building that's not being taken care of. His concern is downstairs where he lives. And she's putting this all together, and she's coming from this person who has nothing, and she's now going to be ready to admit it to somebody who she's known for years with an Angel. She's talking about how she needs to be hired to help him get through, become what eventually becomes Angel Investigations. And she says all of this kind of with this is going to happen, and then says, "That is, if you can still use me." And she drops from being Cordy to this new character that we're going to get to see. And you can see it in Angel's eyes. Like he immediately, for the first time, if you go back and watch how he deals with Cordy and Buffy, it's a whole different thing. His whole face warms up to her, and obviously hires her, and then immediately Cordy goes, "Of course this is just temporary," and she sweeps right back into Cordy. But oh gosh, we're going to get so much more from her in this series than we ever got in the series before. And what I love too is we get so much more from David. Like Angel becomes this full character.
Oh, so much more personality comes out.
Just in that first scene when we get to see him like joking with the guy at the bar, and we get to see him turn into something else completely. He's just an understated actor that probably is never going to get all the props that he needs to get. Even though
I think he's doing okay.
No, correct. Yeah, he's doing
as
fine.
the king of CBS.
I mean, he's been on TV now for, since 1996.
Decades.
I mean, we're close 28 years.
Yeah.
And,
28 years, yeah.
So
he's doing fine as the star of yet another high-profile network show. I don't actually watch SEAL Team, but I watched every single episode of Bones.
Yeah.
I loved it. And I'm so grateful that the industry agrees, that they're like, yeah, this guy is a star. Let's keep, and he must be. There's no way that he has worked solidly for 28 years and not be a good person to work with. Right?
There are lots of stories of him standing up for people over the course of the past 25 years.
Absolutely. Recently we discovered he's a practicing witch.
I love it.
which is crazy awesome.
I know.
He's doing witch rituals on Instagram. I'm so into it.
I think I scrolled past it at first and I was like, hold on. What? And went back. And I think each of us sent something in a
to
group
each other.
Like, did you guys see this?
Yeah. And then I was like, is this for a role? Is he researching a part? And then I was like, no, it seems like a legit part of his life. And
Green flag.
How beautiful is that? Like, because it seems to be all about inner peace and communing with nature and being a better person. He's not practicing Wiccan rituals for like self-betterment.
No.
It's in order to like spread peace, and I am so there for it. Yeah, I'm so on board for it.
And there's no
love him more.
Can you imagine? Like, he just gets on, he does these little rituals. There's no mention about him being. It's just it's who he is. And
there's no like, and watch my show. Like none of that.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
He's just doing his thing.
It's not like a pandemic time thing. It's here I am. Cauldron time. Let's go.
Yeah. And the way he and Sarah Michelle Gellar have supported each other through the years and demonstrate this really nice friendship is also really adorable. It makes me, that's another thing that makes me really like him. When Charisma Carpenter came out publicly with her stories about Joss Whedon, he was all over social media being like, I 100% believe her. This is a true story. I support Charisma. Like,
I was so afraid.
Star power behind her.
I was, you know, you never know anymore who people are.
Because horrible stuff came out about Nicholas Brendan too.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember being like, please don't say anything about James Marsden or David Boreanaz. And so far people have only said wonderful things about them. Yeah. And they were both very supportive during
and
that
are
time.
Still. Over the course of the past couple of years, we've seen lots of all of the actors really coming back and showing up at a lot of different events together, especially as we start to enter the realm of 25 and 30 years separating from the start. The continued support for each other, but I just love watching. Because the fear is always that there's going to be someone that sides with JW on this. And
I mean, whoever that person might be, we're not hearing from them.
Nope.
Right? Yeah. They're not making themselves publicly known. James Marsters is another one who is famously a nice guy in real life. People who've met him all have stories that are like, he was even nicer than I expected, and he gave us of his time so generously, and he, did this and he did that, and this isn't a good time to repeat that Kara sent me a cameo from James Marsters last year when I was going through a rough time, and it is one of my most favorite things I've ever gotten as a gift, and it was so cute. He like sang happy birthday to me. The whole thing was so cute.
I mean, that wasn't even sent to me, but I saw it, and it's one of my favorite things ever.
It's adorable. And he did it within, like, I expected to have to wait a couple of weeks, possibly, because I didn't pay for it to be rushed or anything. But I got it within 3 hours.
Wow.
And I was just like, damn, that was fast.
He loves... And I know we're going off on a tangent here. I guess
that's kind of our brand.
But and I think it's important to this too, because I do think that I don't think we're done with the Buffyverse yet, which is exciting for this podcast because who knows what we're going to get in the future. But I think that nobody has loved this universe and accepted it and embraced it more than James Marsters. Like you've seen...
Agreed.
We've seen character, including David Boreanaz, like kind of distance himself. Like, I'm doing this show now, so I'm not going to talk about that show. He has never done that, and it's not out of necessity. He's done, like, Marsters has been engaged and in shows from then until now.
Yeah, he works steadily,
and he just is that person who has embraced this. And if ever there is another show, and I'm just going to go out on the limb and say there is going to be another show connected to the shows we're talking about now, it's partially going to be because of his connectivity to all of this. And I love it. And I love that. Yeah, I'll leave it there because
it's hard for them to bring back like Spike or Angel to a show because vampires aren't supposed to age. And as good as these two men look, They do not look the same age they were 25 years ago. They have aged. So I don't know if they're even going to try to bring those characters back. I would be on board for however they might try to do it because I love both of those characters.
There is a canon way that they could potentially be brought back and have aged, which
as humans.
I will talk about in
that spoiler section. Yeah, we'll talk about that later. I was thinking about that earlier today too. I was like, you know what they could do. Anyway,
possible.
Yeah.
I have one big thing that kind of to jump off of something that you said, Jim. I'll just jump in.
Yeah, go.
So you had mentioned, Jim, that obviously in this episode, in the first episode, Angel does not save the girl ultimately. He fails, and I think that is a huge part of not only setting the tone for this show and distinguishing it from Buffy, but also letting us know what to expect when Angel does lose that human connection, like Doyle had talked about, because he had gained Tina's trust. He clearly had started to, at least minimally care about her. And as soon as he loses her, he immediately goes into this vengeance mode, which we've seen with him before. And I think one of the key points that ties Buffy and Angel together, like obviously they are very different quote unquote heroes, the tone of the show is very different, but one thing that is similar between the both of them is this notion that what keeps them kind of as powerful as they are and allows them to do what they do is their connection to the world and to people and the connections that they form with those people. It gives them a certain power, it gives them something to fight for, it gives them something to live for. And I think that we see Angel slip into his darker self when that human connection goes away. And that theme comes up over and over again in Buffy. It comes up in this show. And I think they do a great job kind of subtly portraying that to us in this first episode. Because at first I was kind of irritated by Tina, honestly. I was like, what a way, like, he charms her, we feel sorry for her, and then she dies. But I think she really does serve a purpose, like I said, showing us what happens when, Angel is not able to maintain that human connection. And then she introduces us to Wolfram and Hart in a very, linear, sensical way. It makes sense as to how we get to the point of being introduced to this law firm that we know nothing about at this point, really. But their association with Russell is not a good sign.
No. Yeah. Buffy's flawed too. I mean, she's very flawed. But this show does... Angel fails a lot in this show going forward. And I think this does set the tone for that. And I love that part of this show is that he is a superhero character, but it's definitely LA and not Sunnydale. It's definitely rooted in more truth because, we know in real life, things happen and we don't solve them. And there are very often things that happen going forward that we can talk about in the spoiler section where, just like this episode, what we think is going to happen doesn't, and not in a good way, in big ways, like throughout the series. And
we love subverting expectations.
I mean, and that's what this series becomes, all the way up to the finale, including the finale. Like it depending on how you feel about the finale of the show. So I love, and it did again, as I'm talking here with y'all, thank you. I'm starting to love this episode a bit. And Tina, as flawed a character as she is, because Kara, I agree with you. I hated her until this moment. Yeah. She gives us the story that we hear often. She's being abused to not be able to leave because of this character. I mean, it's
a powerful person.
Yeah. I mean, you can look into it however you want, with allegations or truth or Hollywood, as we talked about earlier in this episode. But she spells it out and then doesn't get out. Moments later is dead. And Angel and
she teaches Angel a couple of really valuable lessons too. One, he needs to connect with people in order to save them. He needs to understand their lives a little bit and connect with them. Two, he can't do it by himself because he is a vampire. He can't go out in the sun, and people are going to be afraid of him if they know he's a vampire. He needs a team.
Yeah.
She was a little too trusting of him. Like, that woman has terrible survival instincts.
Oh, she made bad decision after bad decision, but it's not her fault that she rents an apartment from this guy that she didn't know he owned the building.
But just like when she walks outside and he, and he's waiting for her, and she pulls out the pepper spray and she's like, "You work with Russell," and he's basically like, "No, I'm not. I'm lonely, just like you." I was like, "Come on,
yeah, that whole
don't put that pepper spray away, and definitely don't get in the car with this strange man."
Sounds good. Yay.
Yeah. Oh, a lonely man in Los Angeles? I bet he's safe then. No, he's not.
And he is huge. Like, he is an imposing figure. And obviously, we know Angel would never hurt her intentionally, and that he is a good guy. But I was just like, Tina.
From her perspective, she should have been like, "I'm sorry you're lonely. Go take a class at the Y and leave me alone."
Well,
like
he did disarm her though by being like awkward when what did she say?
Oh, you don't hit on girls very often, do you? Or something like that.
And he was like, "It's been a while." I was like, "Oh, buddy." And I did love, though, when they show that scene in the coffee shop before he talks to Tina, where he's looking down at the dog and he kind of can't help himself but smile at how cute the dog is. And I was like, "Aw, Angel likes dogs."
Yeah, well, see, and that's the depth of the show. That's what we need in this first episode, to see that he's not just that brooding guy like off in the distance who's like shoulder huddled and is like, like James Dean,
heart of gold.
Like dark coat in the shadows, billowing coat in the shadows, and just shadows, all the shadows. Yeah,
like that's what
he should have a dog.
Yeah, he should. Yeah, but that's
famously David Boreanaz apparently was discovered walking his dog. That's how he got his first agent and got his audition for Buffy.
And it probably looks exactly like the scene of that man like telling him that he's an actor. I'm not an actor. And,
that's cute.
It's like, yeah, you are. But he does that awkward, like, aw shucks charm so well. There's something he does with his eyebrows when, especially, when Tina has slept over and he's offering her coffee or whatever, and he says, "Do you take milk and sugar?" And she's like, "Yeah." And he's like, oh, because I don't have those things. I was like, what are you doing, man?
I was like, "Aw, you're such a dork."
Yep.
Yeah.
He's trying.
And that's kind of it, right? Like there's a look to him that never really matches what he delivers until
he looks like he's gonna be all like smooth and self-assured, and he only is that when he's Angelus.
Yeah,
Angelus is very smooth and charming, right? And Angel is always
he's Liam,
kind of a dork.
Still Liam in there.
Yeah, it's what makes us love him, right? Because if he was smooth on top of being that good looking, after a while you'd be like, no. This guy.
And through all of this, we go through this whole episode, and how does it end? He picks up the phone, he dials, and we get that moment that you guys got to talk about last week.
Yeah, where Buffy answers the phone.
Buffy answers the phone and he hangs up.
Poor
and you
Angel.
get that moment, right? Where you get they have to connect it back to that show, of course.
Yeah.
But you get that moment where we realize, gosh, he's just this lonely 244-year-old boy who is still in love, is alone, and then we get
girlfriend.
And this is why, like Glenn Quinn, there's something about him too that I love, another boyishness to him. He comes walking in to tell the story of this is who you need to be, and there's flaws to that conversation as we've talked about, but nobody's as more flawed than Quinn's character. And again, it's hard to talk about his character knowing the arc. But I think that Doyle in this episode, I love that he just sort of walks in. I love that he's the first person that mentions the powers that be. a big theme throughout the entire series, and he does such an amazing job being a conduit. What I didn't remember in my head is that we don't see what becomes such an integral part of the show going forward. We don't see him have the vision. He has the vision. And it almost leaves doubt. Like I remember when I first watched this and he handed the note over to Angel, I was like, why is Angel believing this guy? Like this random dude that shows up. Is it because he can sound Irish?
Yeah.
I know.
You know, it's just
like one of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it the momentary, sneeze into demon form that made Angel feel like
that.
I could trust this guy? I don't know.
Cute.
It's so funny. The special effects are so dated. But it's such a great idea that when he sneezes, he turns into it. I love it. There's nothing that scares me more than when I have to sneeze and I'm driving in traffic.
Oh, gosh.
And because I always close my eyes when I sneeze. I can't control it. There's nothing you can do about that. And I'm like, don't crash, you. Like, and I was like, oh my God, if every time I sneezed, like my deepest, darkest secret was visible on my face.
Oh my Lord. Oh.
You just not want to go out in public and like, nope, I'm not risking it.
I have a question about Doyle. So he says to Angel, well, I came in uninvited, so I'm not a vampire. And I'm like, does that work on vampires' residences? I
didn't think so.
I thought that anyone could walk into a vampire's house.
Spike and Angel have barged into each other's places multiple
repeatedly.
times. Yep.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I don't think it works that way.
Maybe
and
it's
also
just a joke.
Our conversation last week about like, do dorms count as a residence or whatever? Mm-hmm. And then like, does an office building where someone lives in the basement count as a residence more than a dorm? Like how does that work? Sometimes you have to invite them in rules are a little fuzzy.
A little fast and loose.
One of my most favorite moments in the whole episode is when Angel breaks into the Los Angeles Public Library at night to use the computers, the super 90s computers, and how he uses all of them, and he has a rolly chair going back and forth.
He's just rolling back
them.
And forth. And I was like, damn, that's brilliant. Brilliant job, Angel. That's awesome.
When I was a film major in college and I was editing, I used to like to go to the editing room at like 5 a.m. before anybody else got there and take the two best editing scene backs. They were these like big editing tables and clear everything out of the way. And I would put my raw footage on one and my edited footage on the other. And I would rolly chair back and forth between them just like that. And I was like, Angel borrowed my trick. Like,
you know what that reminds me of too, every time I see it, is that scene in Jurassic Park with Samuel L. Jackson's character.
Oh yeah,
and
Arnold,
the multiple where the cigarette is hanging, and he's
Ash is that
what
long.
Dennis has done. Yeah, and he's just like, what the, and going back and forth every time I see it. That's what I think.
This had similarly rudimentary internet. The computer screens were like, first of all, the font was like 24-point font, so you could see it on TV, and it was like murder girl,
comma young women. I was like, Angel. It was kind of weird, man.
Yeah, in 1999. It would have taken him 17 weeks, first of all, for anything to come up. And we know the only thing that those computers did really well in 1999 was print like dot matrix like posters.
Yeah. But I loved that, he's on his own, but he has been sort of in training from Giles for the last 3 years. And so he's like, what do I need to do? I need to go to a library and I need to do research. And that's what he does, and it's so cute. And I love that he like breaks in at night using like, I don't know, sewer tunnels or whatever. Everything about that scene made me so happy. I don't really know why, but I just loved it. It was so 1999. Like, if I need the internet, I need to go to a library.
I love that this is who Angel is in that moment. He's by himself, and knowing, you mentioned Giles, and knowing that they're over the course of this season and then next season, we have this sort of Angel Investigations starts as this and becomes just something else entirely. And there's so much more to be added to it and taken away at the same time that there was something raw to this episode that I really appreciate, because you could tell too, because remember, we have two shows that have two completely different appetites that look completely different, which is amazing considering the same people are working on both. But we can see too, as these shows start to separate and as certain people start to facilitate towards one and then the other, this is the beginning of that. And we can start to see the separation of the two shows, which is funny because the only connectivity that we have, aside from obviously Angel and Cordy, is that phone call. And we don't even have, I think that episode 3 or episode 4 is when we first start to have those like episodes that connect into each other.
Yeah, it's 3.
Yeah, it's 3.
But we'll get there.
Yeah. But I love that. So if you've just started with us and you're listening to this podcast, this episode is literally like you sticking your pinky toe into the series, because as we go forward, there's so much more to come, and the world gets so much bigger, separate of Buffy and even together with Buffy. So I am starting to like this episode a lot more.
Yeah, it's funny how that happens with podcasting. It's just it's so weird. Like the more you talk about the episode, the more you like it. And it's wild how that works, because you would think that if you didn't like something and then you talk about it, that you'd be like, talking about it sucks. I hate talking about something I don't like. But it's too fun. We're having too much fun.
Does anybody else have any notes that they have left over? Any points that they haven't mentioned?
I wanted to just bring up how much I love the old school elevator in the building where Angel is living. I love those elevators with the metal cage and that, you have to manually operate. I had one of those in a building I lived in Brooklyn, and it was like one of my most favorite things in the world to operate that elevator. Aww. And, it had a crank in order to choose what floor you were on, and you had to get really good at getting to the floor level. You would often be like 6 inches too high and then 6 inches too low, and then you'd go back and forth and like try to get yourself to the level of the floor. And I was talking about this recently with my neighbors, because we were talking about how we need a freight elevator in our building, and I was like, we need to get one of those ones with the metal cage doors and the crank to operate it. And they were all like, ew, no. And I was like, none of you understand how fun that is. Like, what's the matter with you?
Well, there's a connectivity to old Hollywood with this series, I think, that goes forward, and this is like the first of it. Also, while this doesn't connect to the 60s Batman, who of course went down the infamous like yellow pole, the newer Batmans have cages like this that go down, and I think there's another purposeful kind of connective tissue to that. But I'm always like, I want to live in a building that has that just once. Just once.
I love them. I think they're beautiful and fun.
I've been in
they're probably really dangerous.
I've been in one of those once, and it was a much bigger elevator, and it literally didn't stop in the right spot. We had to step up a foot to get into the place that we were going in. And the person who had done that continuously said, well, at least we got this close. I was like, okay. Yeah.
You don't have to crawl to get out of the elevator. Have fun. That is how they are. And there are some famous old Hollywood elevators that once you start looking for them, you'll see them over and over again in movies and TV. There's a building that shows up in Blade Runner. That's the first time I was aware of it. That later shows up in an episode of Bones. And it has one of those old elevators, and Bones and Booth get stuck in the old school elevator. During like a blizzard, the power goes out. And it's a building. It was also in 500 Days of Summer. It's a famous LA building that's been in a bunch of movies.
There's 3 things that I never saw ever being connected.
I know. Like 6 degrees of elevators.
Yeah.
That's funny.
I guess the only thing that kind of the humor in this, again, I'm very like, Doyle's character is, I love that character so much. He's talking to Angel, and he says, it's not all about fighting and gadgets and such. It's about reaching out to people, showing them that there's love and hope and still left in this world. And then a homeless woman walks up and says, hey, spare change? And Doyle looks at her, get a job, you lazy sow. And I was like, oh, okay.
Ouch.
And then he continues talking about hope, and it's just like how they
no self-awareness.
Yeah. Okay, it's time to talk about pop culture references, and there's one that has a listing of 12 that is not next to my name, and I can't wait to see what happens with that. But Kara, off to you.
I love it. Of course, Doyle refers to the Batcave, Batman's secret hideout beneath his mansion, which is incredibly appropriate for this episode.
Yeah, his basement house.
Yeah.
So Doyle, this is probably the thing I laughed at the most. Doyle says he wants to go out and get some Billy D. And then the next thing you know, we see him holding a bag with what we can only imagine is some Colt 45, which is not a sponsor. Although I would be okay with that. It's obviously it's a reference to the alcoholic beverage known as Colt 45, which ran a popular ad campaign featuring Billy D. Williams, a malt liquor and not a beer. And I know way too much about the difference between the two, but I shall pass off the baton to Penny.
Angel mentions having passed through Missoula, Montana during, he says, the Depression. We assume referencing to the Great Depression, which was the period of time in the 1930s in the United States that is called the Great Depression. And then Tina sort of looks at him like he's crazy, and he's like, I mean, I was depressed there.
I love that.
It's such a funny moment and such a funny line. And then they talk about how there's nothing in Montana. It's just lots of empty space and empty land. It's a good place to be depressed, I guess.
Oh, that's funny. All right. Next up, Angel tells Doyle that he has been in 14 wars, not counting the Vietnam War, of course, because the U.S. never declared it, which is true. There are 14 wars since Angelus became a vampire in 1753 in Ireland and the United States. And in the world, first we have the 7 Years' War between 1756 to 1763. Then, of course, the Irish Rebellion of 1798, also known as the United Irishmen Rebellion. Then the Irish War of Independence from 1919 to 1921. The Irish Civil War from 1922 to 1923. The French and Indian War, 1754 and 1763. And the American Revolutionary War from 1775 to 1783. Those last two will always remind me of the Patriot. The War of 1812 from, of course, 1812 to 1815. The Mexican-American War from 1846 to 1848. The American Civil War, which started on my birthday, April 12th of 1861 to 1865. The Spanish-American War in 1898. And then, of course, we've got World War I from 1917 to 1918, and that's the U.S. involvement in that war. And World War II from 1941 to 1945, also the U.S. involvement. Obviously, the war started a bit prior to that. Then the Korean War from 1950 to 1953, and finally the Gulf War from 1990 to 1991. And Angel, assuming he continued living his life, would be a part of quite a few more wars after 1999.
I mean, if he participated in them. We do know also that he was present during the Boxer Rebellion in 1899 in China.
Very notable.
Well, and this is where I think that they were just being sort of cavalier with this. Oh, yeah. And they literally did what I did when I spent 2 hours trying to figure this all out.
How many wars? Between
yeah, exactly.
So, because I don't believe in my heart. I mean, there's parallel things that happen in Ireland and in the United States that happen here. It's just when I got to the end of this, I was like, there were 14. And I'm like, no, they couldn't have done this because this is too simple.
We know what year Angel got his soul? Because it seems to me that traveling around the world, going to different wars is like a great way for vampires to blend in and get there to eat, right? There's tons of victims. You could have dead bodies all over the place and no one will question you.
They said 100 years ago, I believe, was when his soul was originally restored and the curse was applied. So if we assume that was from 1997, then it would have been
the late 1890s.
Yeah.
So the Boxer Rebellion, I'm pretty sure we're going to find out that he already had his soul when he was taking part of the Boxer Rebellion.
And I just think they're
Oh yeah, he would have had to if the timeline actually.
but they're
fit,
very
but
loose with because
They are.
he says in that little snippet of the pilot, that 5-minute thing that they did prior to this show, he says he's 244 years old, I think he says, but I think
the math does not math.
There's that would probably be reference to him being an actual vampire for 244 years, because I think in a Buffy episode he says he was born in like 1817 or something like that, and
it doesn't add up. But he also spent 100 years in a hell dimension.
Yeah, so
all right.
So
yeah.
All right. So Angel mentions the American football team, the Minnesota Vikings, is playing to lull the guard at the Winter's Gate. That they're like they're friends, and of course the Minnesota Vikings are a football team still there. And lots of teams move in Minnesota, which there is some bro code in Angel that's not there in Buffy that I think we start to see, and this is that, because I've never, even after this episode, gotten the impression that Angel gives two flying things about football, at least American football,
but he uses it.
So it seems to me to be very performative, and maybe that was the point.
And then we've already talked a little bit about this, but Angel drives a black 1968 Plymouth Belvedere GTX convertible, and it is beautiful and huge. It's a huge car.
They're
really
my
big.
son loves this model of car, so I know a lot about it. It's a fantastic car that's been used in numerous things. That it's shown up in Buffy as well, not just Angel's car either. There's been a couple of other ones that have shown up. So
yeah, it's a beautiful car.
All right, now there's so much fun trivia that we're gonna hop into. Penny, we'll start with you with trivia. There's just so many fun little things about this show.
So in the opening credit sequence of every episode, there is an image of a woman standing by the side of a street, looking all forlorn and decrepit, young woman. This is not actually taken from any episode of Angel, but rather it's from the Buffy episode Anne, 1998, though the scene takes place in the show's setting of Los Angeles.
So Josh Holloway, which we mentioned earlier, appears as a vampire in the opening scene, and he would, of course, go on to become a star in Lost just 5 years later. This episode happened to mark his very first TV appearance. Tracy Middendorf also appears in this episode as Tina, and as we know, on Lost, Holloway played regular series character Sawyer, and Middendorf played Bonnie in the final 3 episodes of season 3, otherwise known as the episodes that absolutely ripped my heart to shreds. If you are a Lost fan. And it's very interesting that several series regulars and extras happen to be on both Lost and Angel, so that'll be fun to keep track of.
That always makes me think that there was somebody in the casting department of both shows, like somebody or like similar management or something. Like there was some kind of crossover behind.
Well,
the scenes.
I often think that like Whedon and Abrams are like connected in some way, and they're not really, other than being sort of, Abrams, I think at the time was doing Alias, so I think they were just around the same time doing the same sorts of things, and then kind of launched into big production companies from that. So this one I was gonna mention in notes, but the prosthetics that were used in Angel, except for Angel, were different than they used in Buffy. It was a newly created prototype for this episode. The production team wanted to try a darker, scarier look. The faces were puffier and colored differently. However, they were extremely unhappy with the effects. Thank goodness they were, and soon returned to the Buffy style vamp faces. I don't think they last past this episode in my brain. I just remember I was like, what is going on? Because the main Winters, his face was Josh Holloway, when Josh Holloway vamped, I was like,
ew.
Oh, like, okay, let's not do that. So yeah, I'm glad they figured out that didn't work. I don't know if they tested it or just looked at it and went, what are we doing?
Yeah. Too late to change it for the pilot, but yeah, exactly. When this episode originally aired, it followed The Freshman on the same night. It was directly after it. At 29 minutes into the earlier program in Buffy, she answers the telephone and says, hello, hello, but no one responds and she hangs up. At 41 minutes into this episode, Angel makes a phone call and Buffy's voice at the other end says, hello, hello, and Angel hangs up without speaking. So that's the nice little connection between the two shows.
So sad. So lonely.
I'm glad that was it.
Yeah,
I'm
that
glad
was
that
enough.
they didn't pour the two shows in together like they could have. They waited.
Subtle.
Yeah.
That is nice. And this one, we mentioned a little bit about this earlier, but David Greenwalt and Joss Whedon say in the DVD commentary for this episode that the scene of Angel slipping off the bar stool and walking through the bar with that overhead shot of the ceiling fans was inspired by John Woo films. And you can definitely tell that is the inspiration for that moment.
Yeah, they keep that motif too through the series, which I like. So again, we talked a little bit about this. The first draft of the shooting script featured the character of Whistler playing the part of Angel's mentor rather than Doyle. This was changed when Max Perlich became unavailable. He was reprising a role he had created on Homicide: Life on the Street for a TV movie. They ended up hiring, and I love that they hired Glenn Quinn for that role because I actually prefer him as that character.
I think he has more chemistry with both David Boreanaz and charisma.
Do you think they picked him because he was Irish?
I don't think it hurt. I wonder how much of a role it played, but
it's never been a thing for me. But the more I was thinking about it today, maybe the reason why that Angel was more in tune with him is because he was from Ireland. I don't know. Just a thought.
Maybe
he accepted him more easily. I could see that.
Yeah.
So this was the only episode directly novelized, unlike the mini collections of Buffy the Vampire Slayer episode novelizations of the TV series Angel. However, the novel actually contains several scenes not in this episode, including flashbacks of Angel's backstory that were similar to later flashbacks in the episodes The Prodigal and Darla. Can't wait. Apparently, Angel's human name Liam had not been established when it was written, as he is referred to as Master Angelus during the flashbacks. That's not a huge spoiler. I think we know that he's Liam.
Yeah. According to the book, Into Every Generation a Slayer is Born, Sarah Michelle Gellar surprised David Boreanaz by showing up while the cameras were rolling on the street of Los Angeles and quoted a line from Pretty Woman at him. Welcome to Hollywood. What's your dream? Everybody comes here. This is Hollywood, land of dreams.
That's hilarious.
I so wish that was on film. That would be amazing. Because
that's really, really funny. I love her. The following are two stage directions from the script for this episode. The first one, a woman's laugh draws Angel's gaze to three good-looking guys shooting pool with two good-looking young women, all caps, nearby. They're laughing, having a good time. One of the guys gets behind one of the women, Janice, who may resemble Buffy, helping her line up a shot. And Angel leaps over the last car and, cool action hero that he is, lands in a convertible. Problem is, it's the wrong convertible.
What a great... I could see that scene getting cut out of so many different things.
Yeah.
And the fact that they just put that in there to let us know that how flawed Angel is.
Perfect.
Yeah. And just like a little hint that like this show is gonna have a sense of humor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like,
It's cheeky.
it's not just darkness. Yeah.
It may be dark, but it's cheeky. And then finally, in the original script for the Angel episode, City of, Angel was going to taste Tina's blood after her death, but the scene was cut. The intention was to show that Angel is really on the edge, but it was decided that it was enough that he wasn't able to save Tina. And I am so happy they cut that scene.
Yeah, that would have really upset me.
Yep.
Ugh.
All right, so in continuation with our Still Slaying podcast, Kara, does it still slay?
I think it does. And kind of like you said, Jim, talking about the episode more has made me like it more. I've always thought it was super successful as a pilot because it ties in Buffy, but not too much, and it establishes everything so well. But I think it definitely still slays and is a very successful first episode.
Penny?
I agree completely that it's a very successful pilot and that talking about it makes me like it more than I have in the past. I think it's not as good as Angel is going to be when we get further in, but it does everything it needs to do and it does it well. And it only had a couple of moments that seemed really dated to me. Like the stiffener thing.
That's true.
I was all set to say no. And then we did this podcast. So, does it still slay for me? Of course it does.
Yeah.
Of course it does. Which is what's going to come out throughout the series specifically is that this really was my full entrance into the Buffyverse. I mean, I watched Buffy prior to this, but this was the show I watched regularly. Before I watched Buffy regularly. It was hit and miss for me.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Our watch through was the first time I watched them continuously through. So I love this series so much. I don't remember this pilot at all. I don't think I've seen it since I initially watched it. So it does still slay, just not as much as the rest. I agree with you, Penny. All right, guys, let's head over to the Bronze where we have our very first feedback to Angel and y'all. Come on.
Woohoo!
Get some feedback in. Yay. Of course, our main man, Steve Brown, has some feedback for us. He said he wasn't going to get any in and then realized that we were not running this for 4 more days. So here's Steve Brown.
Aw. Aw.
Amen. Hey.
Thanks, Steve. That's so sweet.
Steve.
Oh.
The good news is you've got plenty of time to catch up on everything because we're alternating from week to week. So if you get behind in one, you can always get caught up in that one the following week. So, All right. So that is the end of our main section of the podcast. Stay tuned for Watcher's Diaries if you want to hear the spoilery section, which I think I have a lot more than I thought I did.
Yeah. And if you'd like to join the conversation, you can find all our contact information at podcastica.com and in the show notes for every episode. And also, while you're over at podcastica.com, you'll find links to our social media pages and all the other Podcastica shows. There are tons of them. There is a Walking Dead rewatch going on The Cast of Us that's really fun. There's a group covering Skeleton Crew, the new Star Wars show on Star Wars TV Cast. I haven't started that yet because I've only watched half of one episode of that show. And as I mentioned earlier, Jim and I covered Agatha All Along. All of that is available for you, and we had such a good time. And if you like Buffy, I guarantee you'll like Agatha. So check that out.
Similar vibe. I wanted to plug Run for Your Lives, another Podcastica podcast with Paige and Daphne. They just recently released an episode covering the movie The Substance, which was a very interesting body horror film that was released. And I know I found it really compelling. Penny, I think you mentioned you did too, and I know Sam did. So we
all watched it kind of at the same time, the three of us. I saw it in the theater and I came home and I was like, I just saw The Substance, you guys. It's I don't know even what to say about it. And Sam's like, I'm just started watching it. And then Kara's like, how do I get it? And then so you two were watching it and I had already watched it and I was getting text messages throughout. It was a very funny evening.
It is an interesting movie.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth watching, especially if you're a woman, but everyone needs to see it.
Or a feminist. Yeah.
Yes.
Watch it.
I'll be watching it tonight. All right. That's Amazon Prime, right?
To get the stream of consciousness gym text while you're watching that movie.
Yeah, that's going to be really fun.
Well, I don't know if I should follow that up with this, but I mean, Cobra Kai cast, I just, if you want,
it's fun
and it feels very much like a 3-step send off of something that I grew up. Jason and I are the same age, and kind of grew up in. I think on different sides of the coin of the Karate Kid. He absolutely loves the Ralph Macchio character, and I've always loved Johnny. So it's kind of fun, kind of walking through this series that has paid such an amazing homage to all of the movies, including the bad ones, that again, kind of like our podcasting, has made some of the bad ones even better, sometimes better good and sometimes better bad. But I think the podcast is amazing, and this most recent podcast that they did, which is the mid part finale, which was an amazing one of the best episodes of Cobra Kai.
Nice.
That I highly recommend listening to. They do a fantastic job with that.
And of course, if you like what we do, give us a 5-star rating, a review, or a like, a follow, and subscribe. Next time, we'll be covering Buffy Season 4, Episode 2, Living Conditions. Thanks, everyone, and...
I don't want to share my feelings. I don't want to open up. I want to find the guy that killed Tina, and I want to look him in the eye.
Then what?
Then I'm going to share my feelings. All right. All right. That's the end of the non-spoiler section. If you want to avoid spoilers, you should stop listening now.
Yep. Oh, goodness.
Awesome. All right. First of all, Wolfram and Hart. We're going to have so many more moments with Wolfram and Hart in the next 5 seasons. And they are one of the best villains on any science fiction TV show. And I'm not just saying that because I am a lawyer, because usually I hate TV lawyers. But I find the whole shtick of a law firm that represents demons and evil beings to be hilarious. And Lindsay is an amazing character. That actor is so charismatic. We also get to find out later in the show that he's a great singer.
He is.
And then soon we're going to get to meet Lila Morgan. And I love Lila in a way that is not rational. I love her. She's evil, but I love her.
Oh, gosh. Fun fact, I have seen Christian Kane in concert before.
Oh, yeah? That's cool.
In Austin, and it was amazing. I was hoping I could stalk him a little bit and at least get an autograph or mention something, but he got out of there pretty quickly. But I was fangirling really hard the entire time. I just love him so much. And he's someone from Texas who is not problematic, and that makes me love him even more. And he's just, you're right, he is so damn charismatic, it's ridiculous. And watching the dynamic between him and Lila is one of my favorite parts of Angel. And Wolfram and Hart, I cannot wait until we start getting more into those episodes. And I love that the pilot kind of, intentionally, I'm pretty sure, bookends the episode with subtle references or not so subtle references to the powers that be, because we learn in the very beginning that Doyle gets his visions from them, and then we end at Wolfram and Hart, and it's just kind of this little nod as to where the story is going. And I think it makes the script a really good, tight script.
The powers that be is a phrase that that entered my vocabulary, and I say it sometimes to mean, I used to use it all the time in my corporate job to mean the executives and the board members,
the higher ups,
the powers that be. And I would say, the powers that be have decided we're going to go in this direction or whatever. And people would always be like, what are you talking about? And I'd be like, how is that phrase not self-explanatory?
I know.
But then I would say like, oh, I just mean, and I would have to like give the long explanation. Like, I mean the board and the execs. And they'd be like, why didn't you just say that? I'd be like,
I used that phrase
'cause I'm a nerd.
unironically last night.
Last night.
Like,
yes.
like it's that corporate speak is kind of stuck.
And I would sometimes I would say PTB, and that would really upset people. They'd be like, we don't know what you're talking about.
That's so
I love that this series has continuous, the arc is continuous throughout the series, and you can tell there was some of it was discovery and some of it was just pre-written, but I think one of the main things that differs between the two series is that this show does have that kind of continuous powers that be that kind of flows through. And of course, Wolfram and Hart, I can't now, I mean, I don't know how dumb I was in 1999, but now when I see it, I literally out loud will say Wolfram and Hart. And I just, it never occurred to me, not once. And I remember when I watched it the other day and I said it out loud, my daughter's like, what are you talking? What are you talking about? And I'm just like, oh, never mind.
You're like, no, that comes late in season 3, early season 3, I think is that revelation, or late in season 2. I don't know.
I really
but
can't remember.
Well,
I can't remember which season is which story, but we'll get there.
The fact that we end up, the thing that you can't see is that, eventually, our little angel investigators become the heads of Wolfram and Hart at one point. And
that is such a weird twist. And somehow they made it work. It's amazing.
It's just the depths that they go in this series in really a short turn of, it's should have been a lot longer, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
It's just an amazing piece to all of this. But gosh, Christian Kane, again, you want to talk about like Wolfram and Hart and how they had different heads of the table, I guess, so to speak, and how different characters were vying for that. And
they're so power hungry. These people who work for Wolfram and Hart are so ambitious that they're competing with each other constantly. The backstabbing inside of Wolfram and Hart, having worked at a big corporate law firm, let me tell you, very realistic. Very realistic.
We get mentioned the senior partners for the very first time in this episode, just kind of an offhanded thing in the phone call when Lindsay mentions that. Of course, we don't know his name is Lindsay yet. I'm super, super curious as to how deep Christian Kane's role was supposed to be and what it turned into, because as he is the only other character other than Angel who makes it to the last episode.
He's in the premiere and the finale.
So I just and I was so happy about that. And of course, and I don't even want to spoil in the spoiler section, but his character takes such interesting turns throughout where we get to see him in so many different roles of being enemies and friends, and
he gets to play. It must have been such a great experience for him as an actor for his first big role, where he gets to play Lindsay going through massive character changes, ups and downs. He gets to be hurt, he gets to be vulnerable, he gets to do action, he gets to sing. Like, there's so many aspects of Lindsay as the season goes on.
Sort of parallel to Angel and Buffy.
Yeah, he gets a murder hand, right? Like, he gets so many great plots.
How did I forget about that?
I remember he loses his arm, and I'm like, well, what are we doing with that now? And then I was like, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Like, awesome.
He's got a murder hand.
He's got a murder hand. So awesome.
Of course he does.
Yeah. Another lost actor, Daniel Day Kim, is going to show up as another Wolfram and Hart lawyer, and I love his Wolfram and Hart lawyer character. So great. So there's just nonstop fun to be had, poking fun at lawyers, and I am so here for it because I had so many years of suffering as a lawyer.
The last time I watched this fully, once like the Wolfram and Hart episodes, I had not yet graduated from law school. So I'm kind of excited.
You're going to have all, and then you went into
now.
being a prosecutor, and now you're at a law firm. So you have a whole new perspective that you didn't
Very
have
wide
then.
range. And I was a summer associate 2 years in a row at big law firms and absolutely hated it. So I'm curious to see how I react now. It'll be fun.
Oh my God. Cordelia is going to go through tons of changes. I loved seeing her current apartment and what a dump it was. Because it's like, it's just a couple of episodes from now that she's going to get her new apartment with Dennis. And it's one of my favorite side characters in the show is Dennis. I love Dennis.
I was like, is Dennis going to show up in this? And I like, no, he comes later, much later. Because she gets a much, no pun intended, sunnier apartment.
Yeah, she gets a better place. I can't. I'm so here for her character changes and arc. She gets so lovable.
Yeah, well, and we're so far away from it, years away from it, possibly. Where the end of her arc is such
angry.
Especially now that we kind of know the backstory of that, and the amazing part about this episode, and I think the thing that I struggle with the most is there's so many colorful characters in the series. We have demons we haven't met yet, and we have kids that are yet to come.
Characters like Lorne.
Yes,
Lorne!
And
I can't wait.
That's what was missing, and just so many different locales.
Yeah,
that make this such a different. Like Buffy always seems to be struggling with. They can't, like. Buffy has to keep going back to school because that's where the Hellmouth is. Whereas this show is untethered by that. And we get to see that play out. And we have puppets yet to come too. So
oh my God, the puppet episode. Oh,
that one's so good.
And I guess one of the funnier things to me today when I was thinking about this episode is that, he says to Cordy, you can't cure being a vampire, and I'm pretty sure it's like midway through season 1.
Oh yeah, he gets cured.
Yeah. Well, he gets offered the cure, right?
He gets cured, and then he has to turn back time.
Yeah.
Which is like a soul-shattering episode.
Oh.
Yeah, it's so heartbreaking. It's unbelievable.
And
I can't wait to get there.
Says it like she's like, so are you still grr? Like the way she asked him is so cute.
And he's like, yeah, you can't cure this, Cordy.
Yep.
Like,
and then she's like, but you're not here to bite people, right? Like, because she remembers when he turned evil. She was there for that. She knows exactly how scary that is.
Well, but for people that weren't so, like for me, it let me know who Cordy was, even though I'd seen Cordy before.
Yeah.
But for somebody who wasn't paying as much attention as I have been through our rewatch, it let me know who Cordy. This show really did a nice job introducing us to Angel and Cordy.
Yeah.
To be fair.
Cordy's whole, like, I'm living in Malibu. It's a good place to start. And then you see her actual apartment and you're like, oh, I see what's happening. Her acting career is not taking off. She hasn't, and she puts on this brave front and you realize she never really lies. She's like, I've had a lot of opportunities. Like, she doesn't.
Yeah.
And she puts on this really happy, cheerful face, and inside she's sort of tragic, and it makes you love her so much. Yeah. If she really were in a nice condo on the beach, you'd hate her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a smart way to set everything up.
Yeah. Oh my God. I'm excited for what's to come. I'm just really excited about it.
I'm so happy that we're here. It's felt like a distant, like off in the distance for so long, even while we were doing Agatha.
Yeah.
You'd sent out the schedule, but I'm so happy that we're here, and I'm so excited to go through this rewatch with y'all and Sam as well. And I just like, we have this wonderful team here of people that I absolutely adore, and it's going to be so much fun going through this with our guest hosts and with our current hosts. And both of these series are really heading into just a wonderful place. So Spike.
Can't wait.
Spike.
So soon. So soon. I checked, and it's episode 3 of season 4 of Buffy and episode 3 of season 1 of Angel. So we're gonna get 2 Spike episodes in a row. And
episode 3, an episode like because it's Spike, and I think we get
Oz.
Yep.
Yeah,
which I love.
Yeah.
I think that these two shows handle the interaction so well. It becomes less and less about Buffy and more just about the universe, and how they handle Buffy in the last season is so awesome, and I can't wait to get there. But that's years down the road. All right. We could go on forever, but that is the absolute positive complete end of our show. Thanks so much for listening, everyone, and until next time, I'm Jim.
And I'm Penny.
And I'm Kara.
Keep slaying.